They said they needed fresh eyes on the company's future. But after 30 years of ensuring every site was safe and legal, they tossed me out like old blueprints. I didn't argue. I just handed the inspector a package I'd been preparing for 8 years. I never wanted revenge. I wanted accountability. And when the first stop work order hit, they realized exactly who they'd fired. The morning it happened was like any other in Charleston. The air was thick with that particular coastal humidity that made my shirt stick to my back before I even left the house. I'd been with COO Developments for 3 decades, longer than some of our buildings had been standing. My morning routine never changed. Coffee from Myrtle's on the corner, a cheese Danish if I was feeling indulgent, and a slow walk through the historic district to our offices on Meeting Street. I loved those walks. 30 years of watching Charleston grow, seeing buildings I'd helped bring to life become part of the city's fabric. COO had been responsible for reshaping much of the city's skyline, and I took pride in knowing that every one of those structures was built right, or at least they had been when I still had a voice that mattered. My title was Senior Quality Control Manager, but what that really meant was I was the guy who made sure we didn't cut corners. The guy who knew every building code by heart, who could spot a foundation problem from 20 yards away, who insisted on doing things by the book. In the early days, that had made me Walter Corelli's right-hand man. By the end, it had made me a dinosaur. The email requesting my presence in the 4th floor conference room came at 9:17 a.m. No agenda attached, no explanation. Just a curt message from Marissa in HR saying my attendance was required at 10 a.m. sharp. I knew what it meant before I even closed my laptop. After 30 years, you develop a sense for these things. I spent the next 40 minutes organizing my desk, not cleaning it out. That would have been too obvious. But arranging things so that when the time came, I could leave with dignity. The framed photo of my late wife, Eleanor, the paperweight she'd given me on our 20th anniversary, the battered copy of the South Carolina Building Code that had more of my notes in the margins than actual printed text, and, most importantly, the red file that had lived in the back of my bottom drawer for the past 8 years. I arrived at the meeting 5 minutes early. The conference room was empty, except for Brandon Keller, our new Chief Operating Officer. He was 35, with an MBA from Wharton and all the arrogance that came with it. His suit probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and his smile never quite reached his eyes. "Malcolm," he said, gesturing to a chair across from him. "Thanks for coming up." I took my seat and waited. No sense making this easier for him. "We've been reviewing the organizational structure," Brandon began, his fingers tapping on a closed folder in front of him. "As you know, COO is entering a new phase of growth. The board has ambitious targets for the next 5 years. I nodded, wondering if he'd rehearsed this speech, or if they taught this particular brand of corporate doublespeak at business school. "Your contributions to the company have been substantial," he continued. "But we're looking to streamline operations, bring in some fresh perspectives. The construction industry is changing rapidly, and we need to position ourselves at the cutting edge." "You're letting me go," I said, not as a question. Brandon had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "We're offering a generous early retirement package, 6-month salary, continued health benefits through the end of the year, and of course, your pension remains intact." From the doorway, I heard a soft cough. Henry Arnett, the chairman of the board, had joined us. He'd taken over when Walter retired, and under his leadership, COO had tripled in size and halved in integrity. "Malcolm," Henry said, nodding at me, "I hope you understand this is purely a business decision. Nothing personal." I almost laughed. Nothing personal. 30 years of my life dismissed as a business decision. "Of course," I replied. "When do you need me out?" Brandon slid a folder across the table. "All the details are in here. Marissa can walk you through the paperwork. As for timing, today would be best. Minimal disruption. I stood up, tucked the folder under my arm without opening it. I'll clear my desk. Henry stepped forward, hand extended. We appreciate your years of service, Malcolm. Corvest wouldn't be what it is today without you. That much, at least, was true. I shook his hand, then Brandon's. Both were firm handshakes, the kind taught in those leadership seminars they were always attending. Empty gestures from empty men. Good luck with everything, Brandon added, already turning his attention to his phone. I left without another word. Back at my desk, I placed the retirement paperwork in my briefcase alongside the red file. I took only what mattered: the photo, the paperweight, my code book. The rest could stay. I'd been there 3 decades. Let them deal with the residue of my career. As I walked out for the last time, I passed Jessica, my assistant for the last 5 years. They didn't, she whispered, eyes wide. They did, I confirmed. Watch yourself, Jessica. Things are going to get interesting around here. She hugged me, which was against company policy. I hugged her back. What will you do? She asked. I smiled. I think I'll start with lunch. I wasn't angry as I left the Corvest building. Anger would come later. At that moment, I was simply resolute. I'd known this day was coming for years, had prepared for it meticulously. The red file in my briefcase wasn't just documentation, it was ammunition. Before heading home, I made one stop, the Charleston Municipal Building. I didn't have an appointment, but I didn't need one. Some connections run deeper than calendars and schedules. Olivia Grant's office was on the 3rd floor, at the end of a nondescript hallway lined with building plans and safety notices. The nameplate on her door read, Director of Building Inspections, a title she'd earned through 25 years of unflinching integrity. Her assistant recognized me immediately. Mr. Everett, let me see if she's available. I waited only a few minutes before being ushered in. Olivia looked up from her desk, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in its usual practical bun. Her face broke into a smile that faded quickly when she saw my expression. Malcolm, she said, rising to greet me. This isn't your usual inspection day. What brings you by? I closed the door behind me. I've been retired, Olivia. Effective immediately. She blinked, genuine surprise crossing her features. They let you go? After 30 years. Fresh perspectives, I said, the corporate jargon sounding even more hollow when repeated. Streamlining operations. Olivia gestured to the chair across from her desk. I'm sorry to hear that. Their loss. I sat down, placing my briefcase on my lap. Do you remember when we first met? She smiled. Of course. I was the rookie inspector who failed your concrete pour because the rebar spacing was off by half an inch. And I was the quality manager who backed you up against my own foreman, I finished. Walter was furious until I explained why you were right. Those were different days, Olivia said, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. They were. I unlatched my briefcase and removed the red file. It was thick, over 3 inches of meticulously organized documentation, photographs, and notes. Which is why I'm here. I placed the file on her desk. Olivia looked at it, then at me, her expression questioning. For the past 8 years, I've been documenting every corner that's been cut, every code that's been violated, every inspection that's been rushed or bypassed, I explained. Materials swapped out after permits were issued, load-bearing structures modified without proper review, sites developed before environmental clearances were complete. Olivia's face grew serious as she opened the file and began flipping through the pages. My God, Malcolm. I tried working within the system, I said. After Walter left, things changed. Henry and his team were focused on growth at any cost. I filed reports, raised concerns in meetings, even went to the board once. Nothing changed, so I started keeping records. "Why didn't you bring this to me sooner?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as she examined a photograph of improperly installed fire barriers in what I recognized as the Westlake Apartments. I was still on the inside, still had some influence. I could stop the worst of it, I explained. And to be honest, I was hoping things would change back, that someone would remember what CORVEST used to stand for. I stood up, closing my briefcase. I'm not in the company anymore, but the people of Charleston are still living and working in those buildings. Olivia looked up at me, her eyes sharp. You understand what this means? If even half of what's in here is verified, CORVEST could face millions in fines, mandatory retrofits, possibly even criminal charges. I do. They'll say you're a disgruntled ex-employee looking for revenge. I nodded. Probably, but the documentation speaks for itself. Dates, times, specific violations. And I'm not asking for anything. No money, no reinstatement. I just want the buildings fixed before someone gets hurt. Olivia stood, extending her hand. I'll need to review everything, bring in my team. This will take time. I shook her hand. I've got nothing but time now. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Malcolm? They really screwed up, didn't they? I paused at the door. Water and gravity reveal all mistakes eventually. Walter taught me that. I'm just speeding up the process. The first 2 weeks of retirement were strange. I'd never had so much unstructured time in my adult life. I painted the back porch. I read novels. I went fishing with my brother-in-law. I tried not to think about the red file or what might be happening at CORVEST. Then, 20 days after my unceremonious departure, my phone rang. Brandon Keller's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called again immediately. On the third call, I answered. Malcolm, he said, sounding harried. We need to talk. I'm listening, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There's been some confusion with the East River Complex project. The city inspector has raised some concerns, and we're at a standstill. The investors are breathing down our necks. East River Complex, the crown jewel of CORVEST's current portfolio, a $200 million mixed-use development that would transform the old industrial waterfront into luxury condos, upscale retail, and office space. I'd raised red flags about that project for months before my departure. What kind of concerns? I asked, though I knew exactly what they were. Technical issues, code interpretations. Look, we need someone who speaks their language, who has a relationship with the inspection office. We'd like to bring you on as a consultant to help us navigate this situation. I let the silence stretch, imagining Brandon in his corner office, sweating through his expensive suit. A consultant. Yes. Short term. Very generous compensation. He named a figure that was 3 times my former salary, prorated weekly. Send me the complete project files, I said. Everything. Not just what you've shown the inspectors. I'll need to see what we're dealing with. Of course, Brandon replied, relief evident in his voice. I'll have Jessica compile everything right away. One more thing, I added. I work independently. I'll review the materials and give you my honest assessment, but I won't lie to the inspectors or help you bypass regulations. Absolutely. We just want to resolve any misunderstandings. After we hung up, I smiled for the first time in weeks. They were desperate. The East River project was their flagship, the cornerstone of Henry's aggressive growth strategy. Any significant delay would spook investors and possibly trigger penalty clauses in their financing agreements. The project files arrived by courier the next morning, 3 boxes of documents, blueprints, and digital records. I spent 2 days reviewing everything, comparing the approved plans with what I knew had actually been built. The discrepancies were even worse than I had documented. The building footprint had been expanded by nearly 8% beyond what was permitted, encroaching further into the setback zones. Support columns had been downsized from what was specified. Fire-rated materials had been substituted with standard ones. And most concerning, the foundation work in the waterfront section deviated significantly from the geotechnical engineer's recommendations. I called Olivia. "How's your review coming?" I asked when she answered. "Methodically," she replied. "We're being thorough, Malcolm. This isn't something we can rush. Check the East River complex, particularly the foundation specifications, versus what was actually poured on the riverside sections." There was a pause. "We've already flagged that project. In fact, I've issued a stop work order pending further investigation." "That's why Brandon called me," I said. "They want me to resolve misunderstandings with your office." "And will you?" Her tone was neutral, but I could hear the underlying question. "I thought we might meet for coffee tomorrow. I have some additional information that might be relevant to your investigation." We arranged to meet at a small cafe in a different part of town, away from both the Corvest offices and the municipal building. The next morning, I arrived early with copies of my analysis and sat at a corner table, back to the wall, where I could see both entrances. Olivia arrived precisely on time, dressed in her inspector's uniform, khaki pants, and a navy polo with the city logo. She ordered a black coffee before joining me. "You look well for an unemployed man," she said, settling into her chair. "Turns out retirement agrees with me," I replied, "though I seem to be busier than expected." I slid a folder across the table. "Here's what they sent me on East River. I've highlighted the most significant issues." Olivia opened the folder and began reviewing my notes. Her expression remained professional, but I could see the subtle tightening around her eyes as she processed the information. "This confirms much of what we've found," she said, "but you've identified several additional concerns we hadn't yet documented." "There's more," I said, leaning forward. "The East River project isn't isolated. These same practices, expanding beyond permitted dimensions, swapping materials, modifying structural elements, they're systematic. Check the Palmetto Business Center, the Wellington Heights Apartments, the Riverview Medical Complex. You'll find similar patterns." Olivia looked up sharply. "You're suggesting a deliberate practice of building outside approved plans." "I'm not suggesting it. I'm stating it as fact. After Walter left, Henry brought in financial people who didn't understand construction. They saw codes and inspections as obstacles to profit, not safeguards for public safety. Brandon is just the latest in that line, an MBA who thinks building codes are negotiable terms in a business deal." She closed the folder, her decision made. "I'll authorize a comprehensive review of all active Corvest projects." "They'll fight you," I warned. "Henry has friends on the city council, donors to the mayor's campaign." Olivia's smile was thin. "Let them. Documentation doesn't play politics, Malcolm. If what you've shown me is accurate, and I believe it is, no amount of political pressure will make these violations disappear. What do you need from me? Be available for questions as we proceed. And," she added, her voice dropping slightly, "prepare for blowback. Once they realize the scope of our investigation, they'll come after you." I nodded. I've been preparing for that for 8 years. The next 3 weeks unfolded exactly as I'd anticipated. I submitted my consultant's report to Brandon, outlining all the issues I'd identified and recommending full compliance with the inspector's requirements. He was furious, accusing me of betrayal and threatening to withhold payment. I reminded him calmly that our agreement was for an honest assessment, not a rubber stamp. Meanwhile, Olivia's team conducted thorough inspections of 11 Corvest projects. They found violations at every site, some minor, some major. 4 projects received stop work orders. 2 completed buildings were flagged for structural reassessment. The call from Henry Arnett came on a Wednesday evening. "You vindictive old bastard," he said when I answered. "Is this what 30 years of loyalty looks like?" "Loyalty works both ways, Henry," I replied. "And my loyalty was always to doing things right, not to cutting corners for quarterly profits." "We gave you a generous retirement package," he hissed. "We could have just fired you outright." "Are you threatening to revoke my pension? Go ahead. My lawyer would love to depose you about why." There was a long pause. "What do you want, Malcolm? Money? A consulting contract? A public apology? Name it. And let's end this nonsense before it destroys everything Walter built." "Walter built a company that prided itself on quality and integrity," I said. "You're the one who destroyed that, Henry. All I want is for CoreVest to fix what they broke, literally. Bring the buildings up to code, make them safe, do right by the people who live and work in them. It would cost millions. It would have cost less to do it right the first time." He hung up without another word. The next day, a letter arrived from CoreVest's attorneys, threatening legal action for breach of confidentiality, corporate espionage, and defamation. I forwarded it to the lawyer Olivia had connected me with at the city attorney's office, who responded with a terse cease and desist letter of their own. The story broke in the Charleston Post and Courier the following week. "Major developer faces multiple code violations." The article was detailed, citing specific projects and problems. It mentioned my name only in passing, as a former longtime employee who had raised concerns internally. The real explosion came at the city council meeting. Olivia presented her findings in a calm, methodical manner, backed by photographs, documents, and expert testimony. The council chambers were packed with reporters, concerned citizens, and representatives from CoreVest, including Brandon and Henry. When Olivia finished her presentation, the council members took turns questioning her, then invited public comments. Brandon spoke first, attempting to characterize the issues as minor discrepancies and misunderstandings. He was followed by CoreVest's attorney, who suggested the investigation was motivated by personal grievances, glancing pointedly in my direction as he spoke. I hadn't planned to speak. I was there to observe, to see justice done through proper channels. But when the council chair asked if anyone else wished to address the matter, I found myself walking to the podium. "My name is Malcolm Everett," I began. "I worked at CoreVest Developments for 30 years, most recently as Senior Quality Control Manager. I'm not here to attack the company. For most of my career, CoreVest built structures that made Charleston better, safer, more beautiful, more functional." I paused, looking directly at Henry. Something changed in recent years. Pressure for faster completion, bigger profits. Questions about safety and compliance were brushed aside. Concerns were labeled as obstructionism. From the corner of my eye, I could see Brandon shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "I'm not asking for anything for myself," I continued. "I'm here as a citizen of Charleston, a city I love. The buildings in question are where our neighbors live, where our children go to school, where our community gathers. They deserve to be safe, not just appear safe on paper, but actually be built to withstand hurricanes, earthquakes, and the test of time." I turned to face the council. "I urge you to require comprehensive inspections of all CoreVest projects from the past 10 years, and mandatory remediation of any deficiencies found. The cost should be borne by the company, not by the homeowners, business owners, and taxpayers who trusted CoreVest to build according to code." The room was silent when I finished. The council chair thanked me and called for a brief recess. As people began to move and talk, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Walter Corelli, my old boss and mentor, now in his 80s, but still straight-backed and clear-eyed. "You did right, Malcolm," he said simply. I should have seen what was happening after I stepped down. You trusted Henry to continue your legacy, I replied. We all did. Walter shook his head. I built that company on a simple principle. Do it right, or don't do it at all. Somewhere along the way, they forgot that. When the council reconvened, their decision was swift and unanimous. All CoreVest projects would be subject to enhanced inspection. The company would be responsible for bringing non-compliant structures up to code. Their building permits for new projects were suspended pending completion of remediation work. The financial impact was immediate and severe. CoreVest stock dropped 22% the next day. Several investors publicly questioned the leadership's judgment. 2 major clients announced they were seeking new contractors for planned projects. A week later, Brandon Keller resigned. The press release cited personal reasons and a desire to pursue other opportunities. 3 days after that, Henry Arnett announced his early retirement, effective immediately. Walter Corelli returned temporarily as interim chairman to oversee the company's response to the crisis. He called me the same day. Come back, he said without preamble. We need someone who knows where all the bodies are buried. I smiled at his choice of words. I can't, Walter. Too much water under the bridge. Then what can I do? How do we save this company? Hire people who believe in doing things right, I told him. Not just saying it, but living it. And be prepared for a long, expensive road back to where you left it. Will you at least consult? Help us prioritize what needs fixing first? I agreed to that much. Over the next 6 months, I worked with Walter's transition team, helping them understand the scope of what needed to be addressed. The total cost of remediation across all affected projects eventually exceeded $200 million, a staggering sum that forced CoreVest to sell off assets and restructure debt to survive. During that time, I received a call from Jacob Harmon, the CEO of Harbor Point Constructors, CoreVest's main competitor in Charleston. He invited me to lunch at his office, where he offered me a position as Director of Quality Assurance. We've always done things by the book, Jacob said, but watching what happened at CoreVest made me realize we need someone whose sole focus is ensuring we never cut corners, even unintentionally. I accepted. The salary was good, but more importantly, the role had real authority, direct reporting to the CEO, veto power over project modifications, and a seat on the executive committee. Jacob understood that quality wasn't just about avoiding scandals, it was about building a reputation that would outlast any single project or profit margin. 1 year to the day after my retirement from CoreVest, I stood on the roof of Harbor Point's newest completed project, a 6-story office building overlooking the harbor. It had been built exactly to specifications, with no shortcuts, no substitutions, no compromises. Every inspection had been passed on the first attempt. Every permit had been obtained before work began. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Former CoreVest COO faces criminal charges for falsifying building records. Brandon Keller was being prosecuted by the district attorney for knowingly submitting fraudulent documentation to city inspectors. Jessica, who had joined me at Harbor Point after CoreVest's implosion, appeared at my side. "Did you see the news about Brandon?" I nodded, gazing out at the city skyline, a mixture of historic buildings and new construction, all part of Charleston's ongoing story. "Do you feel vindicated?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. This was never about revenge, Jessica. It was about accountability, about remembering that what we build isn't just steel and concrete. It's homes and offices and schools where real people live their lives, trusting that someone did the job right. I pointed to a CoreVest building in the distance, scaffolding surrounding its upper floors as remediation work continued. That's the real vindication. Knowing those buildings will be made safe. Knowing the next ones will be built right from the start. Jessica smiled. Walter always said you were the conscience of the company. Walter said a lot of things, I replied. But the one I never forgot was about water and gravity. Sooner or later, they reveal every mistake. You can hide poor workmanship for a while, but eventually, the truth seeps out. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the city below. After 30 years of ensuring buildings would stand the test of time, I had finally done the same for the principles I believed in. Not through anger or vengeance, but through the simple, powerful act of documentation, of creating a record that would speak when I could not. The red file had served its purpose. The buildings would be fixed. The people responsible had faced consequences. And I had found a new place where my insistence on doing things right was valued, not viewed as an obstacle. As we turned to leave the roof, Jessica asked one final question. Do you ever regret not fighting harder when they pushed you out? I laughed for the first time in a long while. Fight? Jessica, that was the best thing they could have done. Inside the company, I was just one voice they could ignore. Outside, with nothing left to lose, I could finally make them listen. The door closed behind us, solid and secure, built exactly as designed.